Hello everyone! Today we've switched locations again because I like being deviant, what can I say? Today we're going to be talking about a kind of hobgobble of just different things because I have thoughts and you've clicked on, so you have to listen now. Yay. I'm going to kind of be talking about like personal moralities and ideologies, not any specific ones, but like personal moralities and ideologies versus author personal choices and ideologies, and how these interact and how we can conflate the author with the narrator, basically. So I'm not looking at any books specifically, I'm just looking at ideology and how we approach morality generally. We've kind of already touched on this, like with Lolita and stuff like that, but I just have some more thoughts, and yeah, this is my piece. Anyway, so I feel like when we think about authors, if you think of it at face value, it's very easy to say, oh, this author wrote about this, so they clearly believe in this because this is what the book says, or like they're clearly a misogynist because one of the characters in the books is like so misogynistic to the point that it's like, how do you even think of that? Which, to be fair, sometimes when you read a book and, you know, it's like, oh, the woman's breast started shooting milk because she was so in love with the main character. It's like, okay, Stephen King, we understand that maybe you don't really like women or haven't interacted with them ever. Like, there's certain instances where obviously those kind of opinions work and make sense, in the sense of like judging the author. But I think a lot of the time we conflate and get confused between narrator and author. And I'm thinking about whether we should, whether we need to, and whether we should demand morality and explicit ideology from authors, like if that's their role and their purpose in society. I don't know. So what I want to look at is the like idea of serving and owing. So in the relationship between an author and a reader, there is an idea of serving and owing that we kind of feed into and don't really question, which I think we should start questioning, because I don't think authors subscribe to this, but we kind of pretend that they do. So in this relationship, technically an author is serving the reader in the sense that they have written this book for them, not them specifically, but for an audience. They've written it. They are serving an audience, serving a particular audience who likes this type of book that they're writing or likes the topic that they're writing about. So you serve the audience, sorry, and then you kind of have this reaction where, oh, because you've written this like for my specific demographic, you now owe me certain truths and ideologies and subscriptions, which just doesn't make any sense. So for example, when you have a feminist book, let's say one of the characters is like really great, quite feminist, quite progressive, blah, 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 but there's a couple of instances where she feeds into the male gaze and she goes to a bar and she's like, damn, why has no one hit on me yet? Feminist reader might then say, oh, that doesn't subscribe to the ideology that you're trying to push of feminism, because that's very unfeminist to allow men to dictate how you feel about yourself. That's not what the author is saying. The author is trying to make realistic female characters and say that you can have multiple opinions about something and that to your core you can still believe a certain truth, i.e. women are equal to men, but then still be victim to patriarchal standards. That doesn't then mean that the author is anti-feminist or is trying to sort of excuse the male gaze and the patriarchy. It just means that they're creating realistic characters. But I think sometimes people are so wound up in being politically correct that they end up just misconstruing what is trying to be shown, if that makes sense. So you have owing and serving, and then if you try and self-insert yourself into these novels and then it doesn't align with your personal beliefs and ideology, you can then get mad at the author, which doesn't make any sense to me. Because also, we know wholeheartedly that you can misconstrue literature and language. Language is a very manipulative process. So I could write a book and I could have very clear intentions and clear ideologies when I'm writing it, but the way it's received can be very different to how I intend it to be. Which is fine, because that's how people read things, and that's kind of why we have, especially in this day and age, so many apology videos and so many like disclaimers, etc. A lot of the times rightfully so, right? But often people don't put these things out maliciously or say things in a certain way because they want to be malicious. So, for example, in the Rocky Horror Picture Show movie, there is a lot of language that we would not use anymore because it is considered homophobic or just inappropriate completely. However, at the time it was very progressive, and at the time it opened people's eyes to the LGBTQ community. That doesn't then make that piece of media morally wrong or ideologically wrong. It's just a product of its time, which I know is a very harmful phrase and can be misconstrued. Again, because language can be misconstrued. So, for example, I'm not saying the N-word was ever okay because, oh, it was a product of its time. Like, no, of course I'm not saying that, but I think that when we consume media, we can't just self-insert ourselves and say this doesn't align with my beliefs, because this book isn't your book, it's someone else's book. This narrative isn't your narrative, it's someone else's, and they've put it out, yes, to be assessed and read and analysed, but not to be sort of frowned upon because it doesn't align with every single one of your morals, because I can guarantee that there will be one line of thought within the book that you will agree with, so then it's like, oh, you don't agree with this but you agree with that one, why does that leave you? Like, you shouldn't be reading books and thinking about them like that. I don't think. When we want this explicit declaration of how an author feels about certain things or what they want to say about certain political topics, I genuinely think it seems to insinuate an idiocy within the general public. Like, that's genuinely how I feel, and let me sort of elaborate on that. If you are giving me a book and you say this is like so feminist and everything about it is so feminist and literally every single sentence is pumped full of feminism and feminism blah 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 blah, I'm not stupid. I know what feminism is. I know when I can detect it. I know when a character is feminist or anti-feminist. I can see when a character is being misogynistic or misandrist. You don't need to make everything so explicit, because then what is the point of reading it? You've already told me all I need to know from the cover and the blurb. When you demand ideologies and moralities from authors that are so explicit and so concerned with being politically correct, you just say to the audience, oh, well, you're dumb. Like, I'm just going to make it really obvious for you. And it really feeds into this anti-intellectualism mindset, because, right, you're trying to be intellectual and trying to be sensitive and creating stuff so explicitly correct, or just so open in its ideology, not even necessarily like politically correct. You do that so much and try to be intelligent and open to the extent that you end up being anti-intellectual, because you're just saying to the audience, you don't actually understand and you can't infer things and you can't appreciate that things are nuanced, and let me explain to you why I need anti-feminist character in my feminist novel. Let me like really explain that to you and actually just get rid of that character completely and make a really flat plot. Great. Thank you. Now, I'm definitely not saying that authors can abstain from talking about politics and talking about subject matters that we deem important and topics that we want to be discussed, because the art versus artist dynamic and argument is a very interesting one, and it's one that I don't fully have a full-fledged opinion on. But basically, can we separate the art from the artist? Can we separate these two things? I think at face value, yes, you can separate the author from the novel, right? Again, we're not saying Nabokov is a pervert because he wrote a novel about perversion. That's just not how it works. That's not right. But can anything ever be read in isolation? I don't know. I want it to be, but I think when we read a novel, we inevitably are thinking, oh, this is a Dickens novel, and Dickens was in this period and he thought this, and it's so important to have those historical lenses and to have those just context for things. But I don't know how I feel. I don't really have an opinion about the art versus artist dynamic. I think, to some extent, yes, separate them, because art is art. But then sometimes it's like, to what extent do we go? Like, what about Kanye West? I don't like streaming his music anymore. I feel immoral, but it's like art versus artist dynamic, some say, and I don't know. I think that's a very big can of worms when you get into that one, but yeah. Because also what this art versus artist dynamic and like separation kind of insinuates is that there's been a time of political peace. It's like, oh, you can separate the art from the artist because like it's fine. The artist's like wrong ideologies and wrong morals, etc., aren't contributing to anything harmful in society, like it's fine. Which, like, of course we've had times where politics and life is more peaceful than others, but we've never had an actual time of peace. It can feel self-effacing and dominating and kind of idiotic to be like, oh, we don't need to worry about the implications of this right now, because you're kind of forgetting that other people have different experiences to you. And it's like a very weird dynamic to be like, oh, but the artist's so good, even if the artist is terrible. Because, like, at face value, that opinion is very true for a lot of things, but then how do we react to that and respond to it? Because then you don't want to end up praising the artist, because how do you praise the art without praising the artist? They're very intertwined concepts. Yeah, I don't think I've actually said anything, but I think overall, literature is history, and history is literature. And whilst we shouldn't demand things of authors or expect them to feed into our own personal ideologies, we should just be sensitive to things and understand that authors have had different opinions, they have mixed opinions, they can change opinions, and that their work doesn't reflect themselves.